Another week, another episode of Shogun. This episode starts off with a flashback of Maruko's past that was revealed last episode. We see her upbringing and friendship with Lady Ochiba. We also witness Akechi Jinsai, Maruko's father, being held back by Toranaga as Goroda beheads what seems to be Buddhist monks or Christians. I couldn't tell. We finally see her marriage to Buntaro, which she was against from the very beginning. A lot of this was implied in the book or maybe mentioned in conversations or monologues but never explicitly shown or focused on. So there aren't any quotes to contrast with this part. There are a few things that seem to be new though. Maruko and Ochiba were not close in the book from what I recall. Maruko also wasn't explicitly trained with a spear, it was just said that she had basic self-defense training. Lastly, I don't think we ever got to see Ochiba's childhood perspective in the book. It was only mentioned in passing by characters. Moving on, after the intro credits, we cut to Toranaga giving a speech to his men about the losses they've experienced from the earthquake, trying to boost the morale of his men. He calls up Blackthorn and rewards him with the title of Chief Admiral and Pilot of the Kwanto. While this was fairly similar in the book, in that version, it was a bit more extravagant, which makes sense considering Toranaga just had his life saved by Blackthorn. In that version, Blackthorn gets much more than a fiefdom and a title. The Anjin-san is given a fief near the fishing village of Yokohama to the south of Yedo worth 2,000 koku yearly, the right to recruit 200 samurai retainers, full rights as a samurai, and a hatamoto to the house Yoshi Toranaga no Chikitada Minowara. Further, he is to receive 10 horses, 20 kimonos, together with full battle equipment for his vassals, the rank of Chief Admiral and Pilot of the Kwanto, page 673. As you can see, he received many more rewards in the book. I'm not sure why they changed that. It makes sense that Toranaga would reward someone handsomely for saving his life, the way that Anjin-san did. Continuing on, even the handing of the swords, while similar, was much more ceremonial in the book. Toranaga threw off the cover. There were two matching swords, one short, the other a killing sword. Noticing that the earth had swallowed my swords and that I was unarmed, the Anjin-san went down into the crevice again to find his own to give to me. Anjin-san, I give these in return. They were made by the master craftsman Yoriya. Remember, the sword is the soul of the samurai. If he forgets it or loses it, he will never be excused. Page 674. Quite the difference. There were also some rewards for Yabu in the book. He was given the lands and provinces of a certain enemy, but since the show hasn't really revealed that person yet and has been known to shake up the timeline of events a little bit, I'll refrain from mentioning who exactly that is. Soon you'll be able to prove your valor man to man, as our forefathers proved theirs. I will destroy Ishido and all his traitors, and first will be Redacted San. I hereby give all his lands, both provinces of Suruga and Totomi, worth 300,000 koku to my faithful vassal, Lord Kashigi Yabu, and with Izu, confirm him and his line as their overlords. Page 674. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd appreciate it. I'm close to 1,000 subscribers, so it would be nice if I could get there. Back to the video. Next we get Toranaga's meeting with Blackthorn and Maruko. The difference between this meeting and the meetings prior is Toranaga's patience with Blackthorn. As he ranks up, he gains more respect. His requests are given more patience and consideration, even if the answer is still a no. I found that excellent and it was well played by Hiroyuki Sanada. Now onto Blackthorn's actual request and my problem with it. Almost every scene in the show where Blackthorn asks to leave Japan or to be allowed to go home is entirely made up. It's not in the book at all, and I'd argue it's not in character for him to even ask to do so. Blackthorn is an intelligent man. He knows the importance of being in Japan and the huge benefits building relations between Japan and England will have on the war and the world as a whole. He almost gave his life to get here, and one of his crewmates was boiled alive because of his decision to be here. Leaving just to leave is a ludicrous idea. Here's an example of the same conversation in the original. Then say this: if I were lucky enough to take the enemy ship, I'd bring her to Edo to refit and count the prize. Then I'd transship my half of the bullion to Erasmus and sell the black ship back to the Portuguese, or offer her to Toranaga-sama as a gift, or burn her, whatever he desires. Then I'd sail home. Within a year, I'd turn around and bring back 4 warships as a gift from the Queen to Lord Toranaga. Page 668. Book Blackthorn is almost always asking to leave for trade purposes, not just for the sake of leaving. He's always asking for his ship to attack the Portuguese or sail home as an ambassador to build relations between their two nations. He's a pilot who values glory and achievement like most men, and he is actually capable of achieving these things. I don't know why the show displays him as a bit of a mopey brute. I hope they stop with these disingenuous depictions moving forward and start showing Blackthorn's bureaucratic skills soon. Outside of that, I'm genuinely enjoying the show and most of its changes from the book. I just hope this one specific thing is rectified for later episodes. It really doesn't make any sense, even within the context of the show's own universe. Enough of that rant, moving on to the rest of the conversation. If you're wondering why Toranaga was so empathetic with Maruko when talking about her father, it's because he understands what she's been through. He also lost family members due to the dictator Goroda and was somewhat glad that Maruko's father killed him, although he'd never admit it since it's dishonorable to defy your liege lord. In the book, Mariko reveals to Blackthorn that 20 years ago Toranaga had put her to death because he discovered she was secretly plotting to assassinate her liege lord, the dictator Goroda, whom she hated. My father often told me he thought they were all lucky to retain their heads. He, Toranaga, Nakamura and all the generals, because Goroda was merciless, relentless and particularly suspicious of those closest to him. That woman could have ruined them all, however innocent they were. Because of her plot against Lord Goroda, her only son Nobunaga was also put to death. Anjin-san, she killed her own son. Think of that, so sad, so terrible. Page 659. This adds quite a bit of context to that scene with Mariko's father being held back by Toranaga. Toranaga clearly knew from experience how Goroda treated those that disobeyed him and how he would jump at an opportunity to kill one of those closest to him since he was always suspicious of them anyway. It also recontextualizes Toranaga in terms of how he rules. All things considered, he is quite a fair ruler and doesn't appreciate mindless violence or brutality, which makes sense since he's served directly under a man who was quite sadistic. With all this context in mind, I love the scenes with young Toranaga, Akechi Jinsai and the Taiko. Also, the actor who played Akechi Jinsai did an excellent job of showing emotion with his eyes. Although we didn't get to see much of him, you could really feel the sheer emotion of every scene he was in. I hope we get another flashback, perhaps showing the hunt of Akechi and Mariko's family and the eventual deaths of them all. It was cool seeing a scene that we had only heard mentions of in the book. This is some of the best parts of having original stuff in the TV show when they can actually expand on stuff in the book. After that, not much happens. We see Hiramatsu escape from Osaka to inform Toranaga of Ishido's plans and get quite a lot of focus on Ochiba looking sinister and plotting with Ishido. It was very slow paced, with the only major plot development happening in this part being the suggestion and attempted appointment of Lord Ito to the council. As this is happening, we see Hiramatsu arrive and the major players in Anjiro discuss the Crimson Sky plan. A fairly big reveal. The timeline of events, however, is somewhat changed. This conversation happens after the introduction of a certain character. This character makes Toranaga's situation much more dire, so in response, he asks them for counsel. They were seated on the mats set in a semicircle around them in the center of the plateau. Without guards, safe from eavesdroppers, Buntaro, Yabu, Igarashi, Omi, Naga, the captains and Mariko, guards were posted 200 paces away. I want some advice, Toranaga said. My counselors are in Edo. This matter is urgent and I want all of you to act in their place. What's going to happen and what should I do, Yabu-san? Yabu was in turmoil. Every path seemed to lead to disaster. First, sire, just exactly what is Crimson Sky? Page 628. An interesting scene nonetheless, but the context of the situation in the book made the meeting much more dire. But I'm not worried. That character is integral to the story in both versions, so I'm sure it was just another case of moving the timeline around a bit. If they don't include this character, then the last half of the show won't be following the book, and I seriously doubt that will happen. Next we have the booking of the courtesan Kiku, and I'll be honest, I found this part somewhat boring. It's no fault of the show, it was pretty similar in the book and I found it similarly boring there. They did cut many of the funny and entertaining following scenes that I wish they'd included. The first of which being the inventory scene. After the initial meeting, instead of taking Blackthorn to the private room, she takes both Blackthorn and Mariko to the inventory room with a wide array of toys on display. It was a pretty funny scene with both Mariko and Blackthorn having hilarious reactions to some of the items, with pleasure pearls and pleasure rings, etc, etc. I'll let you guys figure out what they do. All in all, it was a pretty fun scene and a great way to alleviate the otherwise tense scenario that all the characters were in. The next one isn't as funny as it is satisfying, and if I had to choose between the two, this is the one I wish they'd included. You see, after a first rank courtesan has a guest, they are expected to take their guest to the gate and bow them homeward. It's done to honor their guests. I've said guest like 50 times. Blackthorn made quite a good impression on Kiku and she felt bad for him, which led to one of my favorite scenes in the book. For the first time in her life, Kiku did not wish to bow one guest homeward in front of another guest. What is it then? Is it because I found in the night that I was ashamed by what Omi-san did to him, as we should all be ashamed? Omi-san should never have done that. The Anjin-san is branded, and my fingers seem to feel the brand through the silk of his kimono. I burn with shame for him, a good man to whom that should not have been done. Page 708. Kiku eventually decided to walk Blackthorn out and bow to him. Thank you, Anjin-san, she said, and smiled at him alone. A sigh went through the square. Thank you, then added the time-honored, please visit us again. I'll count the moments until we meet again. He bowed with just the right amount of carelessness, strode off arrogantly as a samurai of quality would. Then, because he had treated her very correctly and to repay Omi for the unnecessary coldness in his bow, instead of going back into her house at once, she stayed where she was and looked after the Anjin-san to give him greater honor. She waited until he was at the last corner, She saw him look back, he waved once, she bowed very low, now delighted with the attention in the square, pretending not to notice it, and only when he was truly gone did she walk back, with pride and with great elegance. And until the gate was closed, every man watched her, feeding on such beauty, envious of the Anjin San, who must be much man for her to wait like that. Page 711. This was one of my favourite scenes because Blackthorn unknowingly got revenge on Omi. It's a bit less clear in the show, but we're outright shown that Omi loves Kiku in the book. He explicitly states that if he could outright buy Kiku's contract, he would, and he'd marry her. So for the woman he loved to give Blackthorn the honour of bowing for that long after he left enraged Omi, which is very satisfying since Omi hasn't really got any comeuppance for pissing on the Anjin's back. And while the show's version wasn't as clear, I do still believe that Omi will be annoyed, and I hope they show that. Last we have the story of Sugiyama. An interesting development in the council. Ishido has been holding all the regents in Osaka Castle under the false pretense of a plot on the heir's life. He's essentially doing this to force the regents to appoint a new member to the council, specifically one that Ishido has power over. All the regents are aware of this but too afraid to defy Ishido. All except Sugiyama, who denies Ishido and refuses to vote Lord Ito into the council. Later on that night, he tries to escape with his family and is caught by Ishido and they're all killed. While it was shocking in the show, the book's version was much more brutal. This was the first real moment that showed us just how ruthless Ishido was in the original. Similar to the show, we don't actually get to see the deaths of the Sugiyamas, but we hear about them later and in much more detail. Possible spoiler alert for next week. I don't know if they'll include this in next week's episode since it's already kind of changed, but there's certain stuff included with Sugiyama's death that could be a potential spoiler, so keep that in mind. If you don't care, just keep watching. Yesterday morning, Lord Sugiyama suddenly resigned, exactly as planned. But before he could make good on his escape, he was trapped on the outskirts of Osaka by Ishido's Ronin. Unhappily, some of Sugiyama's family were also caught with him. I heard he was betrayed by one of his people. Rumor has it that Ishido offered him a compromise, that if the Lord Sugiyama delayed his resignation until after the Council of Regents convened tomorrow, so that you could be legally impeached, in return Ishido guaranteed that the council would formally give Sugiyama the whole of the Kwanto, and as a measure of good faith, Ishido would release him and his family at once. Sugiyama refused to betray you. Immediately, Ishido ordered Etta to convince him. They tortured Sugiyama's children, then his consort, in front of him, but he still would not abandon you. They were all given bad deaths. His, the final one, was very bad. Page 625. Man, that was dark. Overall, I wouldn't say I hate this episode of Shogun. It wasn't all bad, but definitely my least favorite of the lot so far. Even though I've read the book, I don't need it to be a one-to-one adaptation and can enjoy the changes. But if something is boring, it's boring. And unfortunately, many parts of this episode were. Luckily, the upcoming stuff is so dense that they won't have any time to focus on anything boring. And even with the boring stuff, this episode had some interesting moments, so I still have faith in the show. It's just a bump in an otherwise smooth road. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more of these Shogun breakdowns every week. And yeah, till next time.